Continuing on Donald Trump's sanctions on the International Criminal Court, let's bring in Dave Sharma, former ambassador for Australia to Israel, of course, now a Liberal senator. Dave Sharma, thank you.
Good afternoon, Patricia.
Donald Trump has signed an executive order authorising sanctions against individuals and their families who assist the International Criminal Court. What's your response to that?
Well, look, I've noted the decision. I'm not going to welcome it or condemn it one way or the other, but I would say that from Australia's perspective, or certainly from my perspective, I've had deep concerns about the International Criminal Court's decision in recent months, exceeding the boundaries of its jurisdiction and defying some of its foundational principles, including the principle of complementarity. I was critical at the time of their decision to open an investigation and subsequently indict Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his then Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. I don't think they were justified in law. I don't think the ICC had the jurisdiction to it, and I said at the time, and this is still my view, Australia should reassess its relationship with the court. Bear in mind, of course, Australia is a state party to the court. We are a signatory of the original Rome Statute. The United States is not and has never been.
Yeah, that is right. But we heard from our previous guest, in fact, who was a prosecutor in the ICC, that this will have a chilling effect on the ability for the court to even potentially function. Isn't that a worry? I mean, this is a court that's also sanctioned Russia. I mean, this is a court that clearly has a history of doing some very important work.
Look, I mean, I don't disagree with that necessarily, but ultimately, I mean, the court is the creation of states who granted it its powers and ceded an element of their sovereignty on the basis of a set of understanding about how it would operate and what its jurisdictional limits would be. And I think in the early years of the operation of the court, it was quite respectful and mindful of that. But I believe in recent years it has allowed itself to become politicised, and as a result it's discrediting itself. And the US response to that, I don't think should come as any great surprise to anyone, least of all the court itself.
So you're suggesting that the US response, therefore, is justified because of what you say the court has done?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not going to be in a position where I'm, justifying or otherwise. I'm not a spokesperson for the US government, but I'd say it was highly foreseeable. Bear in mind the Biden administration was incredibly critical of the court and the decision it took. Said that the court was Joe Biden himself said the court was asserting a false moral equivalence, that the decision was wrong in law. I don't think it should surprise anyone that the Trump administration not only agrees with that analysis, but has now taken steps to impose sanctions on the court members.
Now, you've written today that Donald Trump's audacious and Middle Eastern plan finally might shock the world into action. But there has been widespread condemnation of this potential plan to take over Gaza. It's also, not basically in line with international law.
Yeah, look, what I was arguing, and I think I've made this point before and I'll make it again, I don't believe President Trump should be taken literally here. He's not like a conventional president that completely formed policy emerges from his lips at press conferences. It is often an iterative process, and where you begin is not necessarily where you end. So I take all of these suggestions with a grain of salt, and I said in that article I think it's highly unlikely that we will see any of them transpire. But I think the general underlying thesis of President Trump's remarks at his press conference with Prime Minister Netanyahu was that previous attempts to resolve this conflict had failed, that the Arab world needs to take greater ownership for resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that Hamas needs to be eliminated. Now, how that is brought about remains to be seen, but I think, the rest of what we heard was, iterative ideas on top of that, and I think I'm more focused on those underlying realities.
Israel's Defence Minister, Israel Katz, has told the military to prepare plans that allow the voluntary departure of Palestinians from Gaza. But as you know, many say that they'll never leave because they fear permanent displacement. Do you acknowledge that that is really at the heart of the conundrum here? People don't want to leave Gaza because they fear they'll never go back.
Well, look, I respect the right of the Palestinian people of Gaza to continue to reside and live in Gaza. That's their home, and ultimately that's where any Palestinian right to self-determination will and should be exercised. Now, if Palestinian people wish to leave or travel abroad, of course I support that, but that doesn't mean that they should lose any claim to their current home. I mean, I'm not in favour of any sort of forcible expulsion or deportation of the Palestinian people at all. I would fundamentally be opposed to that. OK,
you would be fundamentally opposed to that. But look at the suspicion in which it's being treated with after what these people have endured. Is it realistic that people will take up this offer when they are clearly in a state of trauma, but also they fear what the consequences could be?
Look, I really don't. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I think we need to be careful at this point in time in not reacting too literally to every development that happens. I know it's the natural tendency of us all to do it and respond and offer a categorical view on it. But look, I think this is an evolving policy from the United States. I don't think where we are today is where we're going to be in a week or in a month or in 2 months' time. But I believe that what it does signal is a genuine intent to grapple with why there has been no Arab-Israeli peace in the 80-odd years since Israel was founded, and what are the obstacles to that. And I think that is a good thing on the whole.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that you might claim you don't know anything about, but I'm still going to do it, and you're going to move in this direction with me. Keith Pitt, Nationals, very, very kind of senior person in the Morrison government. There's reports, and I have a source saying too, that he's about to be appointed ambassador to the Holy See by Anthony Albanese. You're the perfect person to ask because you've been an ambassador. Would that be highly unusual?
Well, look, I'd say I have seen the media reports as well. Obviously, this would be an appointment by the government, so I can't confirm them. I would say, though, that look, there have been political appointments to the Holy See in the past. Indeed, I believe our first ambassador to the Holy See was Tim Fischer, former Deputy Prime Minister, former National Party leader. And in principle, I do not have an opposition to political appointments as such. I think they still need to be fit for purpose and the right person for the job. But I do not have an in-principle objection to political appointments as heads of mission in Australia.
No,
for Australia.
No, but this is of the other side of politics. Does it show that that Anthony Albanese isn't playing politics if he's looking very, with this open mind, obviously, as he potentially has, to appoint Keith Pitt?
Well, I mean, look, I think to date all this Labor government's political appointments have been from their own side of politics. Gary Gray, ambassador to Ireland, Kevin Rudd, Washington, Stephen Smith, London. There's probably a couple of others that I'm forgetting here. But I mean, I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't look to draw on whatever expertise Australia has to offer, and people who can be good ambassadors for our country or good heads of mission for our country, and who will be fit for purpose for the role they're being put in. But I mean, I'm not going to sort of react to an announcement that hasn't yet been confirmed with an endorsement or otherwise.
OK, fair enough. But you can't blame me for asking, right? We have to at least agree on that. Thank you. I've done my job. You've done yours. Dave Sharma, thank you.
Thanks so much, PK.